Okay, our next question in our Ask Mark inbox has been a question from John. Hi Mark, I really enjoyed your YouTube videos, especially the recent single-ended multi-part amplifier build. My question, is there a good rule of thumb as to the choice of gauge and voltage rating for hookup wire when building a project like this? If you feel this is too elementary for your weekly video, I'd much appreciate you take this on and a reply. Okay, it's not too elementary. It's actually a really good question. I was on Facebook today. Hang on, I'll show you. So it's interesting. On Facebook in the Tube Amp Builders DIY group popped up this question. What gauges of wire do you use, solid or stranded, and what different wire for different parts of the circuit? And I made a reply down here, and someone else replied, yep, I pretty much use the same. A few different people answered similar in line with mine, but maybe slightly different. So it's, and I obscured people's names because I didn't have permission to use them, but it's a common question, so don't feel that this is too simple of a question. But here's the general rule of thumb I use for a tube amplifier. I always use 18 gauge stranded for heater wires. I actually have a friend who uses solid wire for heater wires. He believes it's easier to get straight bends to the corners and around the walls, edges of your board and back to the tube sockets. And he says he has good luck with it, but I've always used 18 gauge stranded. Power supply wiring, any wire connections from say a 350B plus point down to the tube or whatnot, I use 20 gauge stranded. The audio path itself, feedback loop, whatnot, anywhere I'm running the audio signal, I'll use 22 to 24 gauge stranded. And then the ground bus, if you'd watched my video, I showed you how to use some Romex house wiring. That's 12 to 14 gauge solid copper wire. So all those are good. I personally use at least 600 volts or higher rated wire in everything I do. That power supply wire, the 20 gauge that I use, it's all 1000 volt wiring. It's PTFE, in other words, Teflon coated wire that I use. But you're fine if you want to use some PVC coated or plastic coated wiring. I just happen to like the advantage of the PTFE is one, you've got silver coated copper wire on the inside, but two, the PTFE is more heat resistant, so you actually have to use a thermal stripper to pull the ends off. But what that does is if you just touch the side of a plastic or PVC wire with a soldering iron, it will melt instantly and you can see it forever. PTFE is much more tolerant. You could touch it with a soldering iron a few times, wouldn't even bother it. So that's why. I hope this answers your question. You know, if you said, hey, I'm using, instead for heater wires, I'm using 20 gauge instead of 18, I might push you towards the 18 just because you're pulling a good bit of current there. You can always look up a chart. You can always look up a chart like this that kind of says, hey, you know, 18 gauge wire for chassis wiring could handle up to 16 amps. But for power transmission, which what they're really saying here is for longer runs of wire, it could only handle 2.3 amps. But you could go that route and kind of figure out how many ohms per 1,000 feet or whatever. But we're talking 6-inch runs, 12-inch runs, whatnot. So I think the general guidelines I've given you here will work out well for you in building an amplifier. So thanks for watching, everybody.